Welcome to another Web Rough Cuts. In this video we're going to work through how to build out some of our basic layouts in this site. I really like to start simple and work out from there to the more complex, so we're going to be starting with these three layouts and look at them up closer here. So you can see they're pretty straightforward, especially these two, in that they really have the same layout. It's just that this one has a little less content than this one does, and we'll want to consider what to do when we have this nice large image. So let's take a look at this About page, and we'll notice that we have a fixed width on this text that is not allowing that text to go to the full screen, and we're going to want to think about how to take the whole page and limit the whole page's size. So these are some kind of basic getting things going ideas. And so where I like to start is to go onto the body tag and to give it a max width, or actually just a width setting, that is the maximum size for my layout. In this case, 1200 pixels, which you can see over here. If I have this selected, you can see the canvas is 1200 pixels wide. Okay, so that sets the width to 1200 pixels, and then if I set auto margins on the left and right, keep in mind this is 0 top and bottom, auto left and right, then now the layout will be fixed to be 1200 pixels and will stay centered as the browser window resizes. So with that in place, we know that content inside is going to only be as wide as that body tag, but here on the About page and on article pages, we want it to be even more narrow. So we're going to need to consider how we can select just the main tag on the About page, and we could do something like adding a class here, and that is About, or page-about. And yeah, I guess we could just do About page. I usually tend to try to think about putting the kind of most generic thing at the front of a class name. So this is for a page, and then the more specific piece afterwards. But we'll just flip it just to stay consistent with what I have elsewhere so far. Okay, so we're going to go to our style sheet now, and we're going to go alphabetically. And that was About page, so that would go kind of near the top, wouldn't it? And About page. And so in this case, we're going to want to narrow the width to some other setting other than its default. Its default is to be 100% wide. And so I want this to be more narrow than that. In fact, it looks like I've got this kind of set in one column from the left, and maybe it's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 columns wide, maybe 8 columns wide. So I'm going to round that a little bit, and we're just going to say width 800 pixels and margin left 100 pixels. Okay, that ensures that this is going to be 800 pixels wide at most and be offset from the left by about 800 pixels. All right, so we can see that is in place. Now something looked a little bit funny there. Yeah, I actually don't have content on this page yet, but you should. So if we had more content, you would see it there. Now the other thing I can see is that there should be more space between the bottom of the navigation and the top of this page. But I want to consider whether that might be something that I'm going to keep on other pages. So I'm going to do my measuring trick here, and I can see that it's a 60 pixels there, and 60 pixels here, and also 60 pixels here. So it seems like 60 pixels is kind of a standard setting that I might want to do on something broader than just this main tag. So I'm going to see if I have a selector already for main tags. Doesn't look like I do. And I'm just going to say all main tags should have a margin top of 60 pixels. All right, so now we should see that gap appear. Good. And that should now be consistent on all pages, and we could override it when we wanted to elsewhere. Okay, so we've got our About page set in and pushed down from the top. We're going to want to do the same thing on all of our normal article pages. So in this case, we want to make sure that we have a selector we can use consistently on all those pages. So I have applied this class of single article page to all 5 of my article pages. That way I can use this as a selector and it will affect all of those pages. So we're going to do a similar idea down here. We're going to go in and we're going to say width 800 pixels, margin left 100 pixels. And the effect is that article will be pushed over and narrowed so that it never gets wider. And that's just what we'd like. Okay, if we missed it before, something else we want to make sure to do for articles is that the image needs to be set to be display block and have some bottom margins so that we get the spacing that we want. Otherwise, you might have a hard time getting the text to fit down or to be pushed down. So in case you didn't have that, that's another one you're going to want to look for. Okay, so that's taking care of our two simplest layouts, the About page and the sample article. Now for the sample product, notice that the main thing that changes here is that we have two things side by side, which means we're going to need to do a little bit of layout analysis. I'm going to imagine that this page right here is where I'm focusing. I'm going to say, where are my rows and where are my columns? Well, first of all, I would say that there's a group of content here, and that can be broken down into a column on the left and a group of content over here forming a column on the right. So I want to make sure that I have that kind of markup with a container around all of them, and then this item easily distinguished from the items on the right. So that would mean going into my products, HTML files, and ensuring that I have that structure in place. So in this case, you can see I have a container around all of them, but I do not have the image distinguished from the content on the left. So I'm going to want to add some tasteful divs here, and we might say product image, and we're going to put that image inside. And then here we might say product info, and we're going to put all of that product info inside of that column or inside of that little container so that they form or can form a column. Okay, now all we need to do is apply our layout analysis to consider that this main tag is forming a row or container, and then these guys are forming tiles or columns. Sorry, that's product image and product info. So on the row, that is the single product page class, we're going to set it to display, flex, flex flow row wrap, justify content, space between. So those are kind of some of the normal settings that we've used, right? We might find we want some others a little bit later on. Okay, so if we go refresh on one of our product pages, and we'll be able to now figure out what we actually want here. So the single product image class here, we're going to want to set a width so that that can be set to be the desired width, product image. And if we set width, we need to go check our comp, and it looks like the width is 760 pixels. So 760 pixels. And then we want to go to the product info, and we're going to find the widest thing here. It looks like 360 is what we want on this one. Okay, with that in place, we should now have two columns. Okay, now that all of my typos are fixed, we can see the elements are lining up side by side, but the spacing isn't quite right. What I actually want is 20 pixels on the left, 20 pixels on the right, and 40 pixels in between, which, if you think about it, is there because of our gutters, where we actually have 40 pixel gutters, and so on the outer areas that's split in half to be 20, which is exactly what the justify, which is exactly what the setting down here for justify content of space around will accomplish. That evenly distributes any space that is left between here equally around each item. So with that in place, you can see we have the 20 pixels here, the 40 pixels there, and the 20 pixels there, and it's just what we want. Pretty simple, right? Okay, so those few things in place are all we need to do to get those simple layouts finished. Now we just want to make sure that we have all of those same settings in each of the HTML files. So we're going to want to make sure that we have this div and that div in the other product pages as well. Okay, one other thing we're going to want to do is make sure that we've got these buttons displaying the way that they are in the comp. So in case you didn't see that before, notice that these buttons have a fixed size. In my case, they do at least, and yours might in your design as well. They have a width of 360 pixels pretty much everywhere you find them. So the way we're going to do this in our style sheet is to make sure that we have a class of button on those hyperlinks that we want to style that way. And then in our styles, we're going to create a selector for that, like this. We're going to set those to be display block, which will make them very wide by default. So we're going to narrow that width to 360, then set a background color, and then a foreground color, and then any other font settings we need to ensure that they always look the way we want. Then we'll use text align center to keep them centered inside of that width, a little padding, and make sure that we have box sizing border box on to make sure that that padding and any borders you add fall inside of the width that we set. And then we have buttons looking like this, styled consistently throughout the site, as long as we put that class of button. So on a page like this, I have not added it. We're going to want to put it in like that. In fact, I'm going to grab that and copy it and make sure it's on all of my other product links. So they're actually hyperlinks, but they're styled to look like buttons. So we'll just take a look at some of the others, make sure that they're formatted as we want. That one's looking good. And so is that one. All right, we're good to go.